Hey there, welcome to Let Aristocrats Makers. Today we'll be making a felt flower topiary. Here's a list of some of the items you'll need. You'll also need a plant pot. I also have a video showing you how I painted the one that I used in this video. Let's begin. We're going to start by cutting into a styrofoam ball. We're doing this so that we can insert the dowel that we'll be using as the base. So you're going to cut a hole to fit your dowel. As soon as your hole is cut to fit the dowel, you're going to want to use lots of glue. I used a hot glue gun. Please note that when you're using a hot glue gun for this, you don't want to use one that gets too hot because the glue does melt the styrofoam. Once it's nice and glued, you're going to want to make sure to use lots of pressure to make sure that the dowel stays nice and tight inside the hole. You don't want it wobbling around on you when you're working with it later. Once that's done, you're going to want to set this aside and then we'll start working on the leaves. So for the leaves, what I did was I just cut basic leaf shapes. I cut them in all different sizes and different colors, just so I could have a bit of a variation of color tones in the topiary itself. You don't need to cut out too many leaves because we're just using these as small filler points everywhere in the topiary where we spot like little holes. So you don't need too many of them. Now to fold them and give them a little bit more dimension. For the leaves, this is super easy. All you need to do is kind of pinch the end, just one end. So you're going to pinch it and then add a bit of glue and then pinch it and then hold it until the glue is dry. And that's it for the leaves. So you're going to do this to all your leaves. Once you have all your leaves done, you can begin with your flowers. You're going to want to start off by having all your flower pieces cut. So you can start off with a flower template. I found mine on Google. If you just Google paper flowers, flower folding, you'll find all sorts of different kinds. I wanted something simple, so I took a basic 5-petaled flower. I printed it off in a couple different sizes. I think I used 3 different sizes if I'm not mistaken. So I started off by doing that, and what I did was I thought about every flower that I was going to make. I needed at least 2 to 3 flowers cut out for it. If that makes sense to you guys. So what because you want more than 1 layer per flower, so you're gonna want to stack them. That's why you have to figure out how thick you want your flower. The more layers you cut for it, the thicker and fuller a flower you're gonna get. I found that cutting out all the flowers was probably the longest part of this project. So be prepared if you're making this topiary. This is very time consuming. Cutting the flowers. If you're cutting them in a stack so that you cut more than one at a time, make sure you clean up your edges. I had to clean up quite a few flowers when I did this. Once all your flowers are cut, we can start folding. So we're going to start off by taking a strip of felt. We're going to add a little bit of glue along the edge here. Then we're going to fold it over. After it's folded and it's pressed down to make sure that that glue doesn't let go, we're going to cut some little slits along the edge. The edge that's folded, the one without the glue. This is going to create the center of our flower, that little fluffy bit that's in the middle. So what I did was I left a little bit not cut, I folded over again so that it gave me kind of a little base in the middle of my flower. The next step is to roll this. We're gonna start at the end that doesn't have the little slits that we cut in there. We're gonna glue and roll it all the way to the end. Once we've done that, fluff it up, and there's the middle of your flower. Ready to go. Once that's done, we're ready to bring in the petals. So now that we're working with the petals, you'll notice that I'm going to show you a couple different techniques that I used. For this one here, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little dab of glue, just a little drop, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pinch each petal individually. It just kind of fluffs up the petal and it gives it more of a 3D effect. You don't want your flowers to look flat. So we're going to do this pinching technique on all the flower petals. Once that's done, we'll go on to the next step. Next, we're going to attach our little centerpiece that we had made earlier to the other flower petal. So we're going to place it into the center, make sure it's nice and secure with the glue. Then we're going to pinch again. We're going to pinch each petal. We're going to pinch them up and we're going to secure them to the base of the center of the flower. We're going to do this all the way around. Once that's done and all your petals are secure, you can fluff up your flower a little bit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach the two pieces. We're going to take the other piece without the center and glue it to the back of the other one. So how you're going to do this is you want to make sure that your petals are kind of sparse. So make sure they're in between each other. It just gives it a fuller look to the flower. Now this next step I do here, you don't have to do it, but I wanted to make sure that the petals stayed secure and in place. So I glued the back petals to the front petals, just so that they wouldn't move around and they would stay the way I wanted it to look. Now you can add embellishments. You don't have to do this part either, this is optional. You can either use pom-poms, you can use buttons, or any other kind of little embellishment you might have. And there we go. Our first flower is done. Now on to the rest. For this next flower here, I'm using the same flower template like for the petals that we used earlier, but this time around what we're doing is I'm just taking a thin strip of felt and I'm going to roll that for the center of this flower. Now to decide what order we want our colors in. So we're gonna start off by gluing that little piece we just made right to the center of the top petal. And then we're gonna glue the petals. We're gonna kind of overlap them so that they give more of a 3D kind of fuller look. This is how I make my paper flowers. It's a little different working with felt than it is with paper, but the concept is basically the same. We're going to repeat this technique on all the layers with this flower. So like we did before on the first layer, we're going to take the petals one by one and kind of overlap them on an angle. That way they kind of fall over top the previous petal. So just keep redirecting those petals over each other until you're done with all your layers and all your petals. Once all the petals are glued, once again you can fluff up your flower and then add yourself some embellishments. Here I doubled up on buttons in the middle of this flower. I just thought it looked really cute like that. And there we have it, another flower done. Now for the next flower. With this flower, this one's super simple. We're gonna do that same pinching technique we did with the first flower. We're gonna do it all the way around, again, on all the petals for this layer. Once all your petals are pinched and glued, we're going to add a little pom-pom to the middle. This is going to act as the center of our flower. Now we're going to take our second layer and we're going to glue our first layer on top of it. We're going to make sure that the petals kind of fall in between each other, remembering to keeping the fuller looking flower. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do that same pinching technique as we did before, and we're going to pinch the petals in between one another. Moving on to our next flower. Our next flower is similar to a daisy, if I had to compare it to a real flower. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut each petal individually. They're kind of long and narrow. So we're going to cut out a bunch of them. I used about, I'm going to say anywhere between 4 to 6 petals per layer for each flower, and I did at least 2 layers of petals. So anywhere from about 8 to 12 petals minimum is what you need. per flower. Now that we have everything all cut, let's put it together. So we're going to start off with a strip, like we've done before, strip of felt. We're going to glue the one side, fold it over, and then do our little cuts. That will create those little slits that create the center of our flower again. If you accidentally cut off a piece of the strip of felt like I did here, don't worry about it. You can easily glue it into the rolled piece of felt afterwards. So again, with this middle of the flower, I stopped about a little over halfway, and then I folded down the end of it. I didn't cut little slits through the whole thing. It just gives a better base to put a button or a pom-pom on top of. Also, it does kind of make like a little swirly effect in the middle, which is really pretty. So we're going to roll and glue like we did with the first flower to create that middle piece. Once you have your middle piece all done and glued, it's time to add the petals. So I cut different sizes of these daisy type petals. I started off by putting smaller ones on the inside, so gluing them along the edge of our middle piece that we just made. You can add as many of these petals as you want, depends how thick you want your flower to look. So now that I've added all those little flower petals around, the middle piece, I'm going to add the actual flower petals. So right now I'm just trying to figure out petal placement. I want to figure out how thick I want the flower to look, where I want the petals to fall, just the overall aesthetics of the flower. I do recommend you do this. You don't have to do this. It is time consuming, but it's worth it. Now what you're going to do is you're just going to place all your petals however you've decided you wanted to glue them. What I did was I did 6 petals per layer. And then I glue them at the back, but I do also I take a little bit of glue just to say that they're tacked up onto the sides. Kind of gives them more of a rounded 3D bubbly effect. You're going to repeat the same technique as we did before on the previous layer. With this layer here on the second layer, we're going to put all our petals in between the previous petals. That way it gives you a fuller looking flower. With this flower, I ended up with 3 layers of petals. I'm really happy with the results. You're gonna notice that the back of the flower isn't the prettiest, but honestly, you're not gonna see it. It's going on a foam ball, so don't worry about that. Now it's time to put this together. We're gonna start off by cutting a piece of floral foam. We're going to cut this piece of floral foam so that it can fit into our pot. Again, a reminder, if you guys want to watch the video where we painted this pot, you can find it on Les Aristocrats Makers channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut off a piece of foam, and then I'm going to kind of sculpt it, rounding off the bottom. That way it fits snugly into the pot. When cutting the foam, make sure that you're cutting away from yourself. You want to make sure that when you're cutting it, you're kind of rounding off the edge at the bottom. That way it sits securely into the base of the pot. Also, you want to make sure that you do not leave your floral foam too high. If you do, what's going to happen when you put your topiary into your pot, it's going to hide the painting that you've done on the inside. Make sure that the foam is very secure in the pot. You don't want your topiary falling over on you. Now I'm going to secure the dowel into the pot. You don't have to do this step yet. You can leave this for after you've put all your flowers onto the ball. I chose to do it before because I wanted to see, while I placed the flowers, how it was going to look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put hot glue into that indent that we had made earlier, and then I'm going to place the dowel into the hole. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a small layer of glue connecting the floral foam to the dowel, kind of where they meet each other. That way it's a little bit more stable. Now let's add the flowers. I started from the bottom of the ball, making my way to the top. You can add them however you like. I found this worked best for me. Add a little glue on the back of each flower and place it in the desired space on the ball. Keep repeating this process until the ball is fully covered. With the hot glue, you will want to remember not to have it set too high because the glue can melt the styrofoam. When placing your flowers, try to make sure that you don't see any of the styrofoam peeking through. So try and keep them glued up against each other, but not too much because you don't want to flatten them out. You want them to stay fluffy and full. You guys might notice that there are some flowers on this topiary that weren't in the video, like how to make them. If you'd like me to make a video on how to make those flowers, leave a comment down below in the comment section and I'll make a felt flower only video for you guys. Once all your flowers are nice and secure on the ball, it's time to do the check around. What I mean by this is you're just going to turn your ball, you're going to have a look at it, see if there's any spots, if you have any leftover flowers, and you can poke them in. After that, you're going to look for any little bald spots. Meaning, if you see any of the styrofoam peeking through, you're going to take those little leaves that we made before and you're just going to kind of sneak them in there. It adds a little bit of greenery to the topiary, but it also is great for hiding little mistakes. So just do your check around very thoroughly and just add in as many leaves as you'd like. I didn't add too many in because I didn't want to make the topiary look overwhelming. But I added in enough to hide the little white styrofoam ball parts. To prevent this, you could also paint the styrofoam ball prior. You could have painted it green if you'd like. That would also mask seeing it through the flowers. Now that the ball is all covered, let's hide that floral foam. We're going to use some moss. Just a basic moss works, whatever you have. I found mine at Michael's. You can find any kind of moss at your local craft store. So what I do is I'm going to hide the glue that's kind of running along the edge of the dowel at the bottom. You want to make sure you hide any kind of glue or imperfections. So make sure that you cover all the floral foam. Like, if you have mulch, that would work. If you want to use buttons, that would look cool. Doesn't matter, anything to cover up that foam. Once that foam is covered, you're done. You have yourself a beautiful felt flower topiary. You could also add decorations to your topiary if you'd like. I added Mickey ears personally. You could check that out on my Instagram at @learistocrafts. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to like and subscribe. We would really appreciate it. And I hope you come back for the next craft.